I'm 79 years old, and I want to tell you something that most people spend their entire lives getting wrong. Fear is not your enemy. Fear is a language. And like any language, if you don't learn to read it, it will speak over you, around you, and through you. And you will never understand what it was actually trying to say. Most people treat fear like an alarm going off, something to silence, something to push through, ignore, or overcome. And so, the entire self help industry was built on top of that assumption that fear is an obstacle between you and the life you want. But that assumption is the very thing keeping people stuck. Because when you treat fear as an obstacle, you spend all your energy fighting the wrong thing. The first thing you have to understand is what fear actually is at the level of the nervous system. It is an ancient signal. It predates language. It predates thought. When your body encounters something it cannot predict, something it cannot control, something it cannot immediately categorize as safe, it fires. The heart accelerates, the breath shallows, the muscles prepare. This is not weakness. This is millions of years of survival intelligence compressed into a single moment. And here is what most people miss. That signal does not know the difference between a lion in the grass and a job interview. It does not distinguish between actual danger and perceived danger, which means most of the fear running through people's lives has nothing to do with real threat. It is the body responding to uncertainty, to the unknown, to the gap between where you are and where you want to be. And that gap, that is where these verses live. The first verse that actually works when you need it comes from the Psalms. Even though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for you are with me. Now, most people hear that as a comfort verse, something soft, something you repeat to calm yourself down. But that is not the depth of it. Look at what it actually says. It says, I walk through the valley, not around it, not above it, through it. And it does not say the valley disappears. It does not say the shadow lifts. It says, you walk through it anyway. And the reason you can is not because fear is absent, but because you are not alone inside it. The power of this verse is not denial of fear. It is the presence of something larger than fear. Most people are trying to get rid of the valley. The verse is teaching you to walk through it. And it goes deeper than that. The phrase shadow of death, in the original Hebrew it is salmavet, a compound word that some scholars translate not as the shadow of death, but as deep darkness, utter darkness. The kind of darkness that is not just the absence of light, but feels like a living thing pressing against you. And even there, even in the deepest, most disorienting kind of darkness, the instruction is to keep walking, not to stop, not to wait for the fear to go away before you move, to walk. The second verse that works comes from Isaiah. Fear not, for I am with you. Be not dismayed, for I am your God. I will strengthen you, I will help you, I will uphold you with my righteous right hand. What makes this verse powerful is not the poetry. It is the structure of the promise. Notice it does not say the frightening thing will not happen. It says you will be upheld through it. There's a massive difference between a promise that removes difficulty and a promise that sustains you through difficulty. The first kind of promise makes you fragile, because the moment difficulty arrives, you assume the promise failed. The second kind of promise makes you strong, because difficulty becomes the very place the promise proves itself. Most fear responses are actually rooted in a deep belief that you will not be able to handle what comes, that if the worst thing happens, you will break. You will not survive it. This verse is speaking directly into that belief. It is saying you will be upheld, not floated above the hard thing, upheld through it, held up while you are in it. That is a different kind of courage than bravado. That is not the courage of someone who believes nothing bad will happen. That is the courage of someone who believes they will not be dropped even when everything falls. The third verse is from the New Testament, 2 Timothy. For God has not given us a spirit of fear, but of power and of love and of a sound mind. This one operates on a different level entirely, because it is making an ontological claim. It is not saying don't be afraid. It is saying the fear that is controlling you is not native to who you actually are. The spirit of fear, the kind that paralyzes, that shrinks, that makes you smaller than you are, that did not come from your design. And here is what most people miss when they read this verse. The opposite of fear here is not courage. The opposite of fear is power, love, and a sound mind. Three things, not one, because fear fractures all three. Fear takes your power and replaces it with smallness. Fear takes your love and replaces it with self-protection. Fear takes your clear thinking and replaces it with catastrophizing. and the restoration of all three. That is what freedom from fear actually looks like. Not the absence of feeling afraid, but the recovery of your power, your capacity to love, and your clarity. The real power of this verse is in what it implies about identity. If fear is not what you were given, then fear is not who you are. And the moment you stop treating your fear as identity, the moment you stop saying, I am an anxious person, I am a fearful person, I am someone who freezes, and start treating it as a visitor, an experience, a signal that passes through, everything changes. You are not your fear. You are not built for it. It is not your home. The fourth verse is from Proverbs. The name of the Lord is a strong tower. The righteous run to it and are safe. Now, this verse works differently than the others because it gives you something to do with your body when fear arrives. It gives you direction of movement. Because one of the most paralyzing things about fear is that it roots you in place. The heart pounds, the mind races, and the body freezes. And the verse says, run, not stand still, not analyze, not talk yourself out of it. Run to the strong tower. Move towards something solid. And here is the depth underneath that image. A strong tower in ancient warfare was not a place you went to hide forever. It was a place of repositioning, a place high enough that you could see clearly, far enough from the chaos that you could think, fortified enough that you had a moment to breathe and decide what to do next. That is exactly what this verse is offering. Not escape from the battle, a place of perspective in the middle of it. And what gives you perspective in the middle of fear is not pretending the threat is not real. It is getting high enough in your spirit and your faith and your stillness to see the situation as it actually is, rather than as your nervous system is presenting it to you. Because fear always narrows. That is one of its core functions. It narrows your attention, narrows your options, narrows your perception of what is possible. The strong tower widens it again. The fifth verse is from the book of John, Jesus speaking, Peace I leave with you, my peace I give to you. Not as the world gives do I give to you. Let not your hearts be troubled, neither let them be afraid. The key phrase is not as the world gives, because the world's version of peace is the absence of turbulence. You have peace when things are calm, when the situation resolves, when the threat disappears. And that kind of peace is completely conditional, completely fragile. The moment something shifts, it's gone. But the peace being described here is different in kind, not just in degree. It is a peace that coexists with trouble. It does not require the trouble to stop first. The instruction is not, wait until your heart has reason not to be troubled. The instruction is, do not let your heart be troubled. Present tense, active voice in the midst of whatever is actually happening. And this is the deepest layer of all 5 verses. Every one of them is teaching the same thing from a different angle. None of them promise that the frightening thing will not happen. None of them promise that the valley will disappear, that the danger will vanish, that the difficult season will be short. They all promise, every single one, is that you will not go through it alone. You will not be dropped. You are not built for fear in the first place. You have somewhere solid to run. And there is a peace available to you that does not depend on circumstances. And that changes everything about how you use them. You do not use these verses to talk yourself out of fear. You use them to ground yourself inside the fear, to remember who you are while the fear is speaking, to stay connected to something larger than the signal, because the signal will pass. It always does. Fear is never permanent. It rises and it falls. What determines the quality of your life is not whether you feel fear. Everyone does. Everyone always will. What determines it is what you are connected to when fear arrives, what you run toward, what you remember about yourself when the darkness is deepest. I have lived 79 years. I have walked through valleys I did not think I would survive. And I am still here, still walking. Not because I was never afraid, but because I learned, slowly, sometimes painfully, that the fear was not the final word, that there was always something on the other side of the walk, and that the only way to find it was to keep moving through. These 5 verses are not magic words, they are anchors. Use them as such. Read them slowly. Read them before the fear comes, so they are already inside you when it does. Let them form the floor of your mind, not the ceiling of your hope, but the floor of your understanding. Because when fear arrives and the world narrows and the darkness presses in, what you need is not inspiration. What you need is ground beneath your feet, something that does not move when everything else is moving. And there is a practice to this. It is not passive. You do not simply read these words once and become fearless. The ancient practice was memorization, not the shallow kind where you can recite something like a phone number, but the deep kind where the words have been turned over in your mind so many times that they become native to how you think. The rabbis called it hiding the word in your heart, not storing it in your head, hiding it in your heart. Because the head is the first thing fear shuts down. When the nervous system fires, rational thought becomes difficult. You cannot logic your way out of a fear response in real time, but what lives deep enough in you, what is woven into the pattern of how you see and respond, that survives the fear, that is still there when the thinking mind goes quiet. So the practical instruction is this: choose one, not all five at once. Choose the one that speaks most directly to the fear you're carrying right now, not the fear you might face someday, the one you are actually living with today. And spend time with that single verse, not reading it, living inside it, asking what it actually means, asking what it would look like to believe it not just intellectually, but in your body, in your decisions, in the way you carry yourself through a day. Because that is where scripture actually works, not as decoration on a wall, not as a thing you quote to others, but as a living understanding that changes how you move. The woman who walks with 2 Timothy written in her bones does not move through a room the same way as the woman who has only read it once. The man who is genuinely, deeply internalized that he was not built for fear, that he was built for power, love, and clarity, that man makes different choices. He does not spend years shrinking from the thing he is called to do, because he is waiting to feel brave first. That is the final thing I want you to hear. Courage is not the absence of fear. Courage is action taken while the fear is still present. Every one of these verses is addressed to people who are afraid. They're not addressed to people who have already arrived at fearlessness. They are addressed to the person in the valley, right now, in the dark, hearing the sound of their own heart pounding. And the message to that person is not, the fear will go away before you have to move. The message is, move now, move in the midst of it, walk through the valley, run to the tower, let not your heart be troubled. Which means your heart may feel troubled. The instruction is what you do with that. I have lived 79 years. I have walked through valleys I did not think I would survive. And I am still here, still walking. Not because I was never afraid, but because I learned, slowly, sometimes painfully, that the fear was not the final word. That there was always something on the other side of the walk. And that the only way to find it was to keep moving through. That is what these verses give you, not the absence of the valley, the ground to walk through it.